Working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Working Drummer Podcast. I'm Zach Albetta, and my interview today is with Dan Schnelle. Dan was born and raised in New York, but came to LA to attend USC and has stayed there ever since. He is ubiquitous on the LA jazz scene as a member of several ongoing groups, including Josh Nelson's Discovery Project, and as a go-to for artists doing one-off concerts or short stints in LA. While at USC, he studied with Ndugu Chancler, our own Serfaty, Peter Erskine, and Terri Carrington. And it was cool to hear about the unique ass-kicking, for lack of a better term, that he received from each of those teachers. He has some interesting thoughts on the LA jazz scene versus New York jazz scene and the pros and cons of both. This is a good deep dive into the past and present of jazz drumming. You always hear about the hours of practicing and listening and performing that mastering jazz requires. And when you hear Dan play and speak about it, it's obvious he's been putting those hours in for a long time. We recorded this at Dan's house, where his daughter was very curious about what was going on behind that closed door. So you'll hear a couple of her contributions to the interview, despite Dan's wife's best efforts to corral her. But she's 2.5 and more than cute enough to be forgiven. So here we go with Dan Schnelle. Enjoy. Did you grow up in New York proper?
I was born in the Village.
Wow.
My parents are from like Hempstead, Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I grew up on Long Island. I know the city very well.
Right.
A lot of my family has lived in the city, but I never lived in the city proper.
Okay.
For any extended period of time.
What was your musical experience growing up in New York? Like, when did music start and how did it start?
Well, music was always in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But that's partially because I have like 3 older brothers who were in band in school. So there was always instruments around. But I don't know why or how, but I totally just chose to play the drums in like 2nd grade. I was that ass that actually set up like 5-gallon paint buckets and pots and pans.
Right.
And my dad encouraged it because his dad did not let him because there was too much volume in the house.
Right.
And then so by like 3rd grade, I was already taking, short half-hour private drum lessons. And then when they wanted to do auditions at school, they wanted me to play violin because I had good melodic retention.
Huh.
And I was like, no. I'm not playing the violin.
Never even tried it?
Never tried it. I was like, I'm playing the drums or I'm not playing anything. I was like a stubborn little ass.
Right.
And my mom went and talked to the teacher and was like, well, look, he already started drum lessons. So like, can we just give it a try? They said I had bad rhythm.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was really awesome. Like looking back on it, I did not know all this until probably like 7 or 8 years ago.
Really?
My mom told me about it. Wow. I did not know.
So good melodic retention and bad rhythm.
Yes.
Let's play the drums.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Which I definitely showed them.
Yeah.
As I was like all county and all state in 6th grade.
Right.
So
right.
like it was a pretty quick.
So it was drums from the start.
Drums from the start.
At what point did it become jazz? Like, at what point did you say, this jazz is what I want to do?
Not for a long time.
Really?
College.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you do up until then? Garage bands and...
Yeah, I did not play in bands that much.
Just in school?
I played in school a lot, and I played at home a lot, and I took lessons pretty seriously. And so I learned a lot of technical stuff, and I learned how to play along to a lot of my favorite stuff, which was good and bad. It was like it paid off in the long run, but it also was bad in that like I did not always realize where my shortcomings were when I'm playing along to a recording that's totally happening.
Right. Oh, there's a little Little foot.
It's a cute little foot sticking in the door. So yeah, you know, I learned to play along to like Chicago and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. And in high school, I was like a Carter Beauford like freak. I loved that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I should learn to play open-handed and
And the lick.
Yeah, exactly.
I still use that lick, man.
Let's steal some Billy Cobham and just, you know, overuse every Billy Cobham lick we can find.
Yeah.
Although he does it wonderfully, so I can't say anything about it. I took serious drum lessons, though. I took drum lessons with this guy named Al Miller, who, I don't know if you know who that is. But
I know the name,
Yeah, he was like a... disciple of Jim Chapin, and was good friends with Buddy, and was like all technical big band guy, loud and proud. It's got like, I went through like 3 or 4 of his books of all these different fills, all these different coordination things, and because of that, I actually got some lessons with Jim Chapin, which was pretty fantastic.
Cool. So was there a disconnect between what he was pushing on you in lessons and what you were actually doing on your own at home, like playing to rock records, or were you combining?
No, that was pretty combining.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I lacked severely was the musicianship side of it. I was not being, I mean, I did what I needed to do in school. So like I could read music. I could read like the mallet parts, and I could do the timpani stuff, and I did like all state timpani and all that in junior high. And then I started studying with him in high school, and it was just all drums, and it was never like, why are we playing this fill here? It was like, you could use this here.
Right.
And then it's just like, cool. And that definitely has its limits, as we all know. But yeah, so I learned a lot more about drums all through high school than I did about their setting in the music, except for what I was, I guess, naturally learning from listening to a lot of great music that was classic rock oriented, I guess. A lot of Jimi Hendrix, so I checked out a lot of Mitch Mitchell. So, you know, that's good shit to check out.
And this is, I was going to get to this later in the interview, but it seems like as good a time to bring it up as any. One of the projects you do currently is this thing called Project Popular.
Oh yeah,
with Tom Lure, saxophonist, which is a group that takes pop rock material from like the 90s, 80s?
Mostly 90s.
Okay.
There's a Prince tune in there, so that's 80s.
Yeah.
But
so, you know, I know you as just a jazz drummer.
Right.
And I'm wondering what your relationship with pop music has been over the years. And obviously you started listening to it and playing along with it from an early age.
Yeah.
But like how has your relationship with pop and rock and those drummers and those styles and that skill set sort of come along with you into your heavy jazz years?
I don't know. It certainly hasn't been mindful. Let's say that. I spent so much time, probably partially because of my older brothers and my dad's listening habits, that were based on, like I said, classic rock and all that. So I grew up listening to that. Like the jazz that I listened to was like some Miles Davis and lots of what you would call pops, you know, like Sinatra stuff and Ella, but
the same stuff everybody starts out listening to when they get into jazz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Without being like into jazz. Right. And so I guess I already had a connection to that music that I kind of let go of to study jazz more seriously. That being said, when I decided to come out here and go to USC, I remember thinking like, oh, like I want to be like the next Steve Gadd, Peter Erskine, Vinnie Colaiuta. Like those guys went to jazz school. That's how they learned everything that they learned. But they play all this studio stuff, all this different pop music, and it's It's not the poppiest of the pop of like what we think of today, that's for sure.
But it's not acoustic jazz. It's not,
and it's not like all instrumental all the time.
Right.
Like let's play in every odd meter under the sun and go like totally out in all these different directions. Mm-hmm. But they all did that, so they had this flexibility and this freedom within structure and without structure. And so that's what I like came out here thinking, like, oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And then as I started studying it, I just, you get immersed in something and you kind of have to let go of some other things. I still always listen to like contemporary music. I never stopped. I mean, I remember I went to like way before they were big, going to like Black Eyed Peas, like, pre-Fergie, like good Black Eyed Peas. Right. And I remember going to the Roots, like Philadelphia Half-Life tour in New York in high school. And so I was always into great hip hop and rock and all different kinds of stuff. I never really had too many. I went to freaking crazy like heavy death metal shows.
Did you really?
Because I had all these friends that, like, my friend Casey was way into death metal and way into like gnarly hip hop stuff.
Wow.
And so I was listening to Black Star and Gangstar, and I mean, A Tribe Called Quest is from the town right next door to me. My dad was a police officer in like all of that area, Roosevelt and Belmore and Merrick, and like that. I grew up with that music, all those, Tribe Called Quest records with beats, rhymes, and life, and stuff with Ron Carter playing bass. I had no idea who Ron Carter was.
Right.
No.
What death metal bands did you go see? Because I was a metalhead in high school too. Like I was all about the blast beats and the
It was all like Long Island hardcore. So Movie Life and shit. I haven't listened to any of that in a long. Like I haven't listened to that since high school.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the names.
Well, like I was into Morbid Angel and Deicide and Pantera.
I listened to a lot of Pantera.
Yeah.
I definitely checked out, like the more popular Megadeth and Slayer and some Dave Lombardo.
And were you into that drumming? Like, did you try and?
No.
Okay.
I didn't. No, I went to those shows because my friends liked going to those shows. I don't know that I ever really connected with the music, which is probably why I can't remember any of the names of bands. I did enjoy it. I remember going to a show like my freshman year of college when I was home for Christmas break with someone. And even after like 5 months of music school, just being like, what the fuck is this? Like, why am I here? And like, I remember I got an ear, like one of those foam squishy ear things that actually stuck in my ear because I was like trying to put it in so far to just like stop the amount of volume that was coming out that my mom had to use tweezers to get the thing out.
That was your death metal experience.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I think I'm probably good.
Yeah.
I appreciate the energy of it. I appreciate that like those guys had
It's a physical feat, man, for sure.
And the musicians themselves have like some serious conviction, and obviously the better musicians within them are probably writing some worthwhile compositions and stuff. I just I lost my flavor for it.
So one of the things I found out about you early on, which was just something else that's completely fascinating to me about you, is that when you were studying at USC, you started out studying with Erskine.
I did not.
Well, you studied with both Erskine and Terri Lyne Carrington, right?
I changed teachers every year.
Over 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the progression?
I studied with Ndugu Chancler first. And funny enough, as much as he is like Mr. Groove, we were working on like touch all the time. He had me doing like everything under the sun as quietly as possible all the time. And then I moved from him to Aron Serfaty to start like working on some more advanced coordination stuff. And then from him, I moved on to Peter, and that was like an interesting, like, eye-opening experience because he's a kind of a brilliant orchestrator.
Yes.
He doesn't use like 90% of what he's actually capable of on the drums most of the time because he's thinking about like some big picture arc in the music. And then after Peter, I moved on to Terri, and Terri was a lot more like fiery and like just like give me what you got.
Right.
Again, like what? Come on, something else.
I remember you telling me like your experience with Erskine was like stripping your playing down and playing less and just boiling your musical concept down to the bare essentials of the drums and what their role is. And then you started with Terri, and she was like, "Are you going to play anything?" Like
my first lesson with Terri was like a huge smack in the face. It was amazing. I was like, you don't have any chops. like, can your hands do anything? Like, come on, you play me something.
Right.
Can you sing me the melody? Like, all right, now sing me the melody and play something at the same time. And I was just like, oh shit, that's their job, you know?
Right.
And then. So it's funny because I had so much technical stuff that I had worked on and I learned how to use, but I learned how this kind of ties back to what I was talking about high school with like the lack of musicianship training that went along with my drumming training, and I had all these things and I could no longer use them,
right?
Because they no longer had any like musical meaning to me. They were square pegs that I was trying to put in triangles and circles and ovals, and they did not fit, and I needed to like relearn how to use all these things, and I had to relearn how to use them in like realistic tempos and times and locations and songs. You know, as you get further and further into that, you realize there is no actual location for anything. It's all about like, what does the moment ask you to do?
Right.
Not what did you decide to do 8 bars ago that you're gonna now try and put in.
Yeah.
And then something else changed in the music and that no longer makes sense, and you try to put it in anyway.
Right.
It's like
this
that.
is content versus context.
Yes, exactly.
Like Nick did an interview a few months ago, and he talked to, I forgot who the drummer was he was interviewing, but he talked about, you know, you have your content, like you own the content, but you don't own the context, and you have to figure out how your content is going to fit and work in a bunch of different contexts.
100% true.
Yeah,
that's a perfect way of putting it.
So was this progression of teachers and philosophies intentional on their part, or is it just how your schedule shook out for your 4 years there?
I think realistically, I was not ready for Erskine, and he had a very limited schedule in the very beginning, and I totally wanted to study with him, but I think he was probably like, no, he's not ready. And then I chose everything that happened after that.
Okay.
I chose to go to Aron. I chose to go to Erskine, and Aron was like, yeah, Peter, take him. Like, it's a good time. And then I chose to go from Peter to Terri, and I was doing that. I don't know that I was actually ready to leave Peter, but I was definitely ready to get to Terri. I'm sure I could take a whole nother year of lessons with Peter and learn all kinds of amazing new things.
Yeah,
and
I think just about anybody could.
Yeah, new thought process. But it's how it all worked out, and I wouldn't replace any of it. I definitely it's cool.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah.
I learned new things every year from new people and new perspectives on music, as well as new usages for what I was doing.
Right, and so talk about that. Do you think that your college training, did your teachers approach it more from a vocational standpoint, like here are skills you're going to need to make a living and play in a gig that comes your way, or was it from an artistic standpoint, like developing your voice and your expression?
Both. Mm-hmm. First 2 years were definitely more like the skill sets.
Right.
And then when they can see that you're acquiring those skill sets, even though you have much further to go in them, and I would say I still have a very long way to go in them. If you don't start figuring out how to use those skill sets, which is like what you're talking about, the artistic vision point,
right.
And deciding like, that's cool, but that's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important decision to make at some point,
mm-hmm.
you know? Or the opposite is like, I appreciate that challenge. I need to spend some time working on that.
Yeah.
Like, screw it, let's do this.
Yeah.
Dive in.
Yeah.
And so, Terri was the one that really pushed me the most to like develop that voice by like, well, how do you know it doesn't fit unless you try it? Like, you got to try this out, you got to try that out, you got to try this out, like fall on your face again mm-hmm. and again and again. And Peter was less of the fall on your face and more like, okay, now listen back to it and like, tell me why. And Terri was more like right in the moment, like,
right.
That was stupid. You know?
Doesn't matter why.
Yeah.
Did it work or did it not?
Yeah, you didn't like that, and I thought that was the best thing you played all day. You know, and those are like invaluable opinions that you can never have yourself.
Right. Who were some of the drummers other than your teachers? I think in our formative years, like we can all point to certain milestones or checkpoints in terms of drummers that we listened to or drummers that we got really into mm-hmm. at a certain point that influenced our playing, and they work their way into our brain, and we kind of play like them for a little while and then move on to someone else or something else.
Yeah.
Who were some of those cats for you?
I had a lot of the classics.
Mm-hmm.
I transcribed a lot of Philly Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Transcribed quite a few Max solos, some Art Blakey solos. I listened to like every Tony record I could find. Mm-hmm. And I still find new ones. Joshua White just sent me an awesome one. I never checked out Charles Lloyd, of course. And it's like Tony's just being Tony, like young Tony.
Right.
Just destroying it. And, all the usuals. Elvin.
Right.
Lots of Elvin. I worked on tons of Elvin grooves off of like Juju. And I learned Elvin's shit on Speak No Evil, and then I started transcribing like Freddie Hubbard solos off of Speak No Evil, and I transcribed Herbie solos, and I learned to play them on the drums instead of
So you transcribed piano solos and keyboard solos
and trumpet solos.
Wow.
Yeah, I transcribed a few Freddie solos, and I would get notes wrong and shit, and people would help me fix things, and
right.
I started realizing like, oh, well, why is he playing this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's some like Erskine shit. Like, why? You right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, let me see what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And then I was like, that's pretty badass. Let me just check that out.
Yeah.
And so I just started transcribing other people's stuff.
That's a great point, because it's hammered into us that we got to transcribe drummers, and we transcribe drum solos and trading fours and trading eights and all that. But it's not very common in my experience to hear of a drummer actually transcribing horn solos or piano solos. And I think there's so much content for us in the playing of other instrumentalists, and all we focus on is the drummers, transcribing those guys. But
Well,
melodic and rhythmic content, like the rhythmic prowess of so many non-drummers, I think can teach drummers a lot.
Yeah, well, and there's also some funny things that, like, just as the drums have things that are very tailored to the instrument, pianists and saxophone players and trumpet players have things that are very tailored to the instrument, and they fall easily or they don't fall easily at all. And then when you learn them on a different instrument, it's like, oh shit, like how does that work out? Like I never learned how to like squeeze quintuplets in here normally, like comfortably, not without being like Anthony Cerrone, like Portrait of Rhythm or something like that, where it's like, let me just drill this with the metronome over and over, you know, and that's never actually comfortable. You're not necessarily hearing like a musical reference there. So
it's a math problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is not really a great way to learn all that stuff. But as I did that, I definitely I started thinking a little bit more melodically, which also kind of ties in with definitely the drummer that I have transcribed the most, like ever in my life, is Roy Haynes. And talk about not using drummer shit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's melodic motion on the drums and unpredictable stuff. And I don't think I really sound like him in any way, really. But I steal his fucking ideas like mad.
Yeah.
And his his thought process still just intrigues me all the time. I can go listen to I still will go back to We Three, and I'll go back to Out of the Afternoon, and you know some of the classics, some Pat Metheny or some Chick Corea, right? Now he sings, now he sobs, or the trio with Dave Holland, all that stuff. There's always something new. Yeah, always something new there. Yeah. It's not. It's always like, damn, that's Roy, but it's also like, damn, where did that come from?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, formative years for sure. Lots of time with that. I definitely spent some time like doing the groovy thing too. That's not still jazzy, but groovy, like Al Foster. Billy Higgins. And, I got way into high heel sneakers. The Blue Mitchell record with Al Foster. That's like real groovy. Yeah.
Were you into Victor Lewis?
I have listened to a lot of Victor Lewis, but I've never ever transcribed anything.
But I'm just thinking about it in terms of like the groove playing,
Yeah, that, and same thing with like Frankie Dunlop, like just like constant perfect time, not ever getting in his own way, not getting in the music's way, just kind of just this through line, it's almost like a big band rhythm section but playing in a trio, and like sensitive,
and those guys, I mean, you mentioned sensitivity, and when you talk about just playing time and not complicating things, I think it gets a bad rap sometimes as being kind of static. But those drummers that you mentioned, like, had this ability, still have, because most of them are alive, still have this ability to just play time and not complicate it, but at the same time it's so dynamic and so expressive and just always adding to the music and not just marking time.
Absolutely. They're not marking time at all. They're paying attention.
Totally. Was coming to Los Angeles for college an intentional move in that you wanted to make a living here? Did you think about going back to New York after you graduated?
I tried to go back numerous times as far as like applying to grad school and all that. I got waitlisted for the artist diploma at Juilliard a couple of times. I was a finalist for the Monk Institute a bunch of times when it was in New Orleans and when I was in LA. And my thing was, so just to back up, I have 3 older brothers.
Yeah.
And when I was graduating high school, and I applied to a few schools on the West Coast and a whole bunch of schools on the East Coast too, and not all for music.
Really?
Yeah. So
what was the alternative?
Veterinary medicine.
Wow.
I got into the Delaware program as like a music minor, but a veterinary medicine major.
Wow.
Georgetown. I applied to the business school in San Diego, and I got like a full ride.
Wow.
And I went to like a prep high school that was like, it's like one of the top ranked high schools in the country. So they're like out here. That's a big deal.
Right. Was that stuff you were actually interested in, or were those all plan B, C, or D if the music thing?
Yes, exactly. So USC was my number one choice, and luckily I got in. And my reasoning, I had a whole conversation with my dad about it. I remember being like, if I don't do this, I will never do this. It's like you don't go backwards to music school. Like that doesn't really make sense. Like I can hate it in a year and decide to leave music school. But if I don't say yes to this right now, it might not happen. So, and then my brothers, having all gone to college already ahead of me, they're just like, go west, get the hell out of here, go west. Yeah, so I was like, okay, great. And then when I graduated, I did a whole tour of the East Coast with this big band. And I was like, I would love to move back east, but I can't do it right now. Because if I move back, I don't have any money. I don't have a place to stay. I'm in debt from school. Like I'm going to move into my parents' house and I'm going to have to get some kind of like job. And so I was like, can't do it. Not doing it right now. I need to be able to practice. Right. So I stayed out here, and I mean, like we all do when you graduate, I wanted to go to grad school, but I was like, I'm not going to grad school yet. And I need to start working. So I started doing some teaching for the Monk Institute and just piecing random gigs together. And then like 2 years later, that's when I started applying grad schools. And then at that point, I was like, I am not going to grad school unless it's free. That's it. Draw the line there. Like not happening unless it's free. And so it never happened.
You did okay though.
Yeah, it's still going. So there's plenty to learn. But so anyway, I thought about moving back east numerous times. I mean, my whole family's in New York for the most part, or at least the East Coast. Right. And I would still love to move back there, but now I'm in I guess there's a different space in life. I mean, like I have no desire to move to Brooklyn with a 2.5-year-old. Right. And
I'm not sure I want to without a 2.5-year-old.
Well, you know, the city is at some good energy. For sure. Yeah. But also, so Lillian has, she's an opera singer, and I
want to get into that too, because I'm wondering how a jazz drummer and an opera singer find each other. We'll
get there. But she already lived in New York for a long time, so she's not really itching to go back. I mean, if a very good reason for us to move back came up, we would certainly consider it. But right now, I think we're focused on our family and like different career goals now. So we're kind of
it seems building. Like you both got plenty of work here.
We're both working more than enough.
Yeah. I mean, Mom and Dad are busy.
We are busy. We're paying our bills, and she certainly sucks up the rest of the time. You know, she's so damn cute all the time.
She being your daughter.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. We're in front of microphones. I should reference these things. That cute foot under the door.
Right. So how do you stack up the LA jazz scene against the New York jazz scene? Do you compare the two? Are they very different?
I don't know. They are very different. They are very different. There is just as many world-class musicians in both cities. They might have slightly different ideas of what is right or what is correct. and then the cream of the crop in both cities kind of wipe away the right and the correct vibe. And they start looking at music in a larger sense, as opposed to like, oh, if you don't know this set of tunes, then you're not a real jazz musician. Well, and then there's the other side that's like, well, you don't know all of these tunes. And
But you're saying the best cats rise above that. And,
yeah, because if they want to learn something, they just go and learn it.
Right.
And it's all good.
Right.
That being said, there is very good jazz scene here.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more limited than the jazz scene in New York. And the jazz scene, well, I mean, just sheer numbers. Like, you go into New York and there are, like, you know, hands down, like 20 drummers that are bucking, swinging.
Yeah.
All the time, like, they know their shit.
Right.
All those guys that we mentioned, they know that stuff.
Yeah.
You mention those guys here, and a lot of guys know them, but they don't necessarily, like, start talking about records. You know? And then the opposite problem that I've run into in New York is, like, they're so serious about some of those records that they're actually closed-minded to any new interpretations
it becomes dogmatic.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, I mean, a lot of my favorite drummers all live in New York.
Right.
And a lot of my favorite musicians live in New York. I mean, I think the most obvious sign that New York is definitely a more fertile jazz scene is bass players. That tells you everything you need to know. Bass players.
Why?
Because there are a ton of great bass players in New York that work all the time and can read their asses off and can play changes like all day long, like nobody's business. They don't repeat themselves. And they can make their way through all kinds of normal forms and weird forms and keep it interesting or keep it solid.
Right.
And hear that the numbers are just a lot fewer. There is like 10 guys. And as soon as you get out of that 10 guy list, you're like, maybe I should just call an electric player, because at least like we'll go some different directions, and like they're great musicians. Right. So like they don't need to be on upright necessarily.
Right.
But like I said, there's just greater numbers in New York of cats that are like very, very competent within the idiom. Right. Very competent. The number of saxophone players, the number of piano players that like, really know their shit. They don't just listen to like Herbie and Chick. They're like, no, you don't listen to Kenny Barron and Red Garland and Kenny Drew and
Gene Harris. And,
the list is endless. But that being said, there's a very strong music scene here, and there's a lot of really fucking great jazz musicians that live here, and there's a lot of great jazz musicians here that don't do anything here. They tour and they do a lot of other work, and they do a few gigs here. They're like, like 20 gigs a year. Right. And then there's a whole bunch of cats here who are jazz musicians, but they don't take it as seriously because they have a whole bunch of other gigs that they're doing as well. Where it's like, I'm a saxophone player and I love soloing over changes, but I do 100 gigs a year where I'm in a horn section. Or someone like Garrett Smith is like a beast of an improviser. He's an amazing trombone player, but he's busy. Yeah. He's got plenty of gigs playing in horn sections all day long. And like he'll take a solo any chance he can. But there's not many of them.
But that's just as much of a skill as being a great improviser, I think, to whether you play a horn or a rhythm section instrument, or being part of a section is a skill that I think some great improvisers don't have.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's why it's kind of like it's a two-way street, you know. That's where being so, like you said, dogmatic or stuck in the ways things are supposed to be can also be a detriment to your musicianship, right? I mean, and that's where that first comment of like you learn to rise above those limits kind of comes in. Yeah. And I mean, if you're not working on that stuff all the time, then you're always going to be limited as a musician.
You're a member of a lot of different instrumental projects, but you've also played with a good number of singers in LA. Yeah, Jesse Palter and Kathleen Grace.
Sara Gazarek.
Sara Gazarek, of course.
Yeah, lots of different singers.
So what is required of you behind a singer that's different from playing an instrumental group?
I don't know. I mean, I like working with singers. I mean, well, so my better half is
right. And one of the reasons I ask is because being married to an opera singer, not a jazz singer, but a vocalist, I would imagine that you've gotten some insight as to what a singer needs, how a singer processes.
I don't know that she's given me a lot of. Sorry, my wife's name is Lillian. Lillian has given me a lot of insight into vocalist abilities and starting to pay attention to like where's their ceiling, like what are they really capable of, because she notices so many things that I don't notice, and I'm noticing more and more all the time. So I guess the thing that I've learned is probably the same thing that you learn with horn players, which is there's some people that like want you to challenge them, and there's some people that are just wanting you to like just do your job well.
Make them comfortable.
Yeah. And so I kind of enjoy doing both. So I try not to take anything too personally. Like if you don't want me to push too much, I won't push. If you want me to push, like, all right, you let me know when that's too much.
Right.
And like Jessie wants me to push. She likes, certain things she wants to be straight ahead, and there's a vibe. And Sarah, same thing. It's like some tunes, it's like, yeah, this is it. This is like, we want this kind of clean thing here. And then other times it's kind of open to interpretation, and she knows that I might do something different than what she's used to, or I might do exactly what she expects, and both are cool. On the same tip, I do actually enjoy listening to a lot of singers, so and I am a big fan of like serious classics. So I listen to a lot of Ella and Sarah Vaughan, and I mean Betty Carter is my shit. Our first dance was to Betty Carter. Oh, man, that's cool. So I listen to a lot of singers too, and that's part of like, to me, that's part of the idea of like learning how great rhythm sections function. Like it's not just all about those amazing rhythm sections that played, with so and so, and we're like all fire all the time. It ties right back to Roy. Like he's a beast with Chick Corea. He's a different kind of beast with singers. And when you have that that flexibility, I think it turns less into like playing a role and more into like just paying attention to what the music's doing and figuring out like how you can best support it and like make it better and not show off what you can do better.
Right. And I think what you mentioned about not taking it personally is really important, because I think especially when playing with singers, some instrumentalists feel handcuffed. Like they feel like they have a certain sound and they got hired for a certain reason.
Yeah.
And if you don't want me to do that, then why am I here?
Right.
But not taking, the needs of the song or the needs of the singer personally.
Incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, unless you have a pretty big name, that singer maybe heard you once. They might be hiring you on a recommendation from some other drummer, and it's like they might have an idea of what they want you to do already, and it's like, okay, well, cool. Right. I'm gonna do what I think is appropriate until you tell me otherwise, kind of a thing. That's how I usually. And
a lot of times, like, the reason you get recommended is because somebody knows or thinks, for whatever reason, like, Dan can do that. Yeah. Like, I know what you need and Dan can do it. Right. And he can do a bunch of other shit. He can do whatever, but like that thing that you need, he can do that.
Right. That's hopefully. Yeah.
One of the projects that you are most notably and most reliably part of is Josh Nelson's Discovery Project.
Yeah, I've done
so tell people a little bit about who Josh is and what the Discovery Project is.
There's not enough people that know who Josh Nelson is. That's kind of.
I agree.
That's kind of not cool.
It's one of the reasons we're doing this.
Yeah, so Josh is an absolutely amazing pianist, and he's like that. I guess one of the things that I love about his playing is that same thing we were just talking about. He is like as much of a like Mulgrew Miller, Herbie Hancock fan as anybody, where it's, like, let's play, let's just go to town on this tune,
just swing.
And then on the exact like polar opposite side of that, he is super composed and has done like a billion arrangements for singers, and can read his balls off, and has like a pretty incredible resume anyway, without having to get like too far into it. But so I've only played with Sara really because he was like, I knew Sara for a long time because we went to school together, but he was the one that was like, you should hire Dan when Zach can't do it. Zach Harmon. Right. So, so through him, I've gotten a lot of the work that I've had the last few years. I mean, he and I have been playing together for 6+ years now, and like pretty wide-ranging musical spectrum. Yeah, a lot of.
He is equal opportunity, man. Like as far as musical influences or bags.
Absolutely. I mean, like, he knows like musical theater crap inside and out. He knows classical music inside and out. He's like constantly collecting vinyl.
Right. And like old Hollywood soundtracks.
He knows soundtracks better than anybody I've ever met. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some composers that would school him, and he would tell me, like, I don't know shit compared to so-and-so, because he's a very humble guy. Right. But he is never done studying. He's always like checking out some new music or and he definitely has a thing for Hollywood. Like he loves checking out old school like studio arranging stuff for the great singers that people don't think about as West Coast, but they came out here in the 60s to record this album and then record that album with strings or with a big band, and then the scores. I mean, he knows scores. He's constantly watching old movies,
right? Like Twilight Zone.
He's very, very deep in it. Yeah, and then, like I said, turning on like all kinds of straight ahead, just flipping the switch back and forth.
So the other thing about him is that he's a pretty heavy science nerd.
Yes.
And the Discovery Project, as I understand it, is kind of like the musical expression of his science nerdery.
Yeah, you could say that. He likes to. As he does the projects, he tries to generally distill his ideas or like focus his ideas down into something. Mm-hmm. So the Discovery Project was.
It seems like each one of these compositions is sort of telling the story of a particular scientific discovery or a particular phenomenon,
or something that he's fascinated with.
Right.
And so like Tesla's coil is not something that I play on his solo piano, but I think what he loves is that it's like this guy invented this crazy thing that didn't work out, but it not working out is what led to all of these other discoveries. Mm-hmm. And so that just like totally fascinated him. And he's looking at it saying, like, he's a genius in his own right, but he totally doesn't get any credit because people don't look at that, because that's not how we conduct electricity now.
Right.
Freely across the air. And same thing, he appreciates people that are like thinkers, that, Jules Verne, writers, people that have, open imaginations that run wild, and like, why do you have to limit this?
Right.
Like, it's those people that functioned outside of reality that helped to actually expand reality.
Right.
It's like, well, if you just assume that you can't do that, well, then you're never going to discover if it's possible, or if it truly is not possible, or at least not possible the way you're currently thinking about it.
Yeah.
So he really, he likes to keep his mind open to a lot of different things. Yeah. And, at the same time as looking at old movies and listening to old music, he's sitting there reading this month's version of Scientific American on his coffee table.
Right. And posting all kinds of shit on Facebook about NASA and Mars. And
he and I did an awesome tour of JPL in the fall with Chuck Manning, who works there.
Wow.
And
the Jet Propulsion Lab?
Yeah, we went and we did like
in Pasadena?
Yeah, did the off-book tour with Chuck. Because you can like sign up and do the regular tour, but then if you know someone that works there, they're encouraged, because it is a government facility. It's our tax dollars pay for it. They're encouraged to actually take time out of their schedules to give people tours, like private tours that have everything to do with the main tours and nothing to do with it. So like, we got to go check out all kinds of crazy stuff. And Chuck's brother is like, he is one of the directors there. Yeah. So he's been in charge of a lot of huge missions, and Chuck has a very specific job that he does. But so he showed us like what his job was, and then he took us all over the place, and we were like walking around where they like test out all the wheels and stuff that are actually on Mars, like all the backup wheels that are still just spinning in circles so they know how long they last. Like these experiments that last for years, years long experiments, and going into like the huge rooms that are completely like beyond free of germs, where they build everything, and you're standing behind inches of plastic, and
oh my god,
it's completely fascinating stuff. And I'm a total science nerd too, so we are always talking about that. I'm more like the anatomy, biology, physics nerd.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
the latest album in the whole Discovery Project timeline is Exploring Mars.
Yeah, the most recently released one. Yeah, there's some other stuff coming, but he wrote the music for the most recent landing on Mars.
Right. And
so each of the main pieces of music were written for each of the different rovers that are on Mars. So again, that's where like the distilling thing comes down. Whereas like he's thinking about he's writing the music kind of geared towards something. So
right, and it's impressionistic, sort of like capturing the essence of a certain geographical spot on Mars, or
for that it was specifically about the rovers. The main pieces were about the rovers. All of the solo compositions that are in there's like a solo drum thing, there's a solo guitar thing. Each of those are named after areas on Mars. And then what else is on there? Mars, the Bringer of War from the Planets.
Right, the solo piano version.
Yeah. And then
How You Love Me on Mars was the song that he and Kathleen Grace co-wrote.
Yeah.
Which is just a gorgeous, beautiful, cool song.
Yeah, he's just an incredible songwriter.
Yeah,
and that goes to show like that's no matter how much complexity he can add to anything he wants, he really wins at writing melodies.
Yeah,
like holy shit.
Yeah,
it's just he's an amazing composer and. That was never meant to be like the centerpiece of the album. It just kind of like presented itself very clearly as like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course that's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about the solo drum piece on that album. Remind me of the title because I'm blanking on it, of that drum piece.
It's called Solus Lacus or Lacus. I don't even know how you say it exactly. Lacus. It's the eye of Mars.
Okay.
It's a dark spot on Mars.
Okay.
And so when we were doing this, part of what we were doing was a name that has definitely come up a lot more the last few years, Alex Chaloff, who's a great video editor, video recorder, sound editor. He has always been like very involved in everything that we're doing, and he was putting together images of things. And then Travis Flournoy, who does a lot of the live video for Josh and has like an incredible bank of footage that he uses, and he became more of the actual provider of like film material, and then Alex is more like the guy that's just recording everything for us. Travis started pulling up all of the footage that they had. Like we used the simulation of the landing on Mars for the newest rover, and had all these different clips that kind of like tie all of this together. And Josh and Travis, including for the newest project, which they've been working on, like work pretty closely, where Travis is told an idea by Josh, and then he just starts compiling all these different clips of video footage, and then they get together and they start talking about it, and he's like, oh, okay, well, let's change this, and we don't need any of these, but let me find some more footage that kind of relates to this more clearly.
Right.
And so as Travis built up that library and they started like focusing it more and more, we started playing all the songs to live video, right? So Travis was already doing live video and kind of improvising the video so that we're not stuck playing to like a click track where it needs to fit 4 minutes and 11 seconds or whatever. It doesn't. He could sit there and fade in and out of all different things, and he's got all these cool controllers. And Travis started getting into like really learning how to improvise and really starting to pay attention to how the music like moves and goes up and goes down, and then so we started doing that live, and then so when we went in to record, Alex and him brought in all these fucking TV screens, and they were like all over the place, and we're like trying to read all this music and get it right, and then also trying to like pay attention to a screen that's got like some video that I'd never seen before. So, long story short, we did that entire record in one day in the studio, other than the solo piano, Mars.
Right.
And so I have no idea what I played on that solo drum part, because it was one of those things where there was no preconceived notions of what I was going to play. I was playing along to a video that nobody can see.
Wow.
And so I just made up this thing based on what I was watching.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then I did 2 takes, and they picked the one.
Wow.
I didn't even get, yeah.
Man.
Josh was just like, is this one cool? And then Alex was like, yeah, we need to edit it down. It's too long, and there's some places where it doesn't really go anywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because I'm watching a video.
Was it the same video for both takes?
It's very similar. Yeah. It was the same stuff.
That's so interesting, because I mean, listening to it, I assumed that, I assumed it was improvised, but I assumed that there was sort of a preconceived concept for that piece and that idea and that part of, like, that feature of Mars, and you're going to do a musical representation of that.
We figured out the names of the solo tracks afterward based on the vibe that the track kind of brought.
Okay.
So, same thing. So Larry's is called Memnonia Quadrangle. Mm-hmm. And he did the exact same thing I did.
Wow.
He did 2 completely free solo guitar-like pieces.
Watching a video.
Wow. And as you expect, if you've seen us live, if you ever see Larry or I live, like, half the time we're like watching, and half the time we're like eyes closed, just like, where's this going? Like, can I just hear this thing? And so it was a good challenge to just try and figure out, like, where's this going?
Yeah.
It didn't. It was certainly not like something that I've been working on.
Right.
Like, let me figure out how to do this. Let me figure out how to do that.
It was just in the moment.
Just completely freely improvised.
Wow.
Right then, based on what I was being shown.
That's a cool way to make a record.
It is. It's like extremely liberating and extremely frustrating at the same time. And it was kind of perfect because we didn't have time to like hem and haw over it.
Right.
It was like, we'll get to that, we got to do the next tune.
Yeah.
Like, we got to do the next tune. And we did 2 nights. We recorded all day on a Sunday, and we did Friday and Saturday night at the Blue Whale, like working the music out with the videos and stuff, like just like getting it down.
Right.
So that we went in on Sunday, and it was just like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think Josh slept like 4 hours, and he was just like cross-eyed, like, what just happened?
Yeah, I think I talked to him not long afterwards, and he's like, I'm never making a record after 2 nights of gigs ever again.
Yeah, but there's like a good energy that, like it or not, was brought because of that.
Yeah.
So there's...
I say like it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's an interesting album, and it's definitely like... I think it was a challenge for him. He was trying to like raise the bar for himself. Like, I don't want this to be like all clean and perfect and like arrangements of standards that I can do in my sleep, and that as long as we rehearsed them a few times, you guys would be fine on. Right. This was more a little bit out of his comfort zone, a little bit more like, I want to like tackle something different that means something to me, and that hopefully means something to somebody else, and not overdo the details.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was you're part of so many projects and so many groups, some of them ongoing like Discovery Project and some of them just kind of one-off, like so-and-so is coming into town and doing the Blue Whale and Dan's on the gig. Do you have a specific method for staying on top of all this material and coming to the gig confident in your knowledge of the tunes and knowledge of the musicians that you happen to be playing with that day? Because from my perspective, you're involved in so many different things. It's got to be hard to just keep shit straight and feel confident on the gig.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess I have been working on so much different music for so long that, I mean, well, sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes it's like I barely got into this music, and we're only playing it like on one show or 3 shows,
right.
And it's like, holy shit, the 3rd show is like, it's so much easier. Like, why couldn't they all be like this?
Right.
And then other times, it's like, cool, I haven't done any stuff like this before. Let's just do it. Let's go for it.
And listen and hope for the best.
Yeah. And there's some that are like, challenging, and man, I wish I either did prepare or could have, because sometimes it's just like there's not enough time
so
to really, or not even so many hours, but like you can sit there and learn someone's music off their record and get to know all the material, but then if you still haven't played with them, that is its own challenge. So it's like, yeah, I've never played with you, but we're playing standards. Like, cool. Right. I already know the material, so now I get to just pay attention to you. Like, what do you do? How do you make your way through these things? What kind of things do I instantly recognize? What kind of things am I surprised by? Right. And other times it's like the music is so intense that you feel like you don't even get to know what they really improvise like, but you get a good idea of their personality from the music that they've written. And I guess the helping point always is, when you have material ahead of time. I am certainly confident in my sight reading skills for the most part, unless it's like some gnarly reading.
Which sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is. I mean, it's pretty rare that anybody gives me music harder than Dan Rosenboom's. So I feel mostly comfortable. Because I can read my way through his music now, having gotten my butt kicked a lot. And I guess it's kind of that same thing that we talked about in the beginning. It's like trying to pinpoint what is the most important thing here. So doing Rosenboom's music, I mean, now I've done it a lot, so it doesn't matter. But learning how to shift gears constantly is what I had to learn with him. With Nelson, it's like, how do you give everything shape but keep the forward momentum, right? And with Dick Oates, it's like swing, keep up, I've been doing this since before you were born. I've been swinging harder than you know how to still,
right?
And then someone like Gilad Hexelman, I mean, holy Jesus, he is got the most incredible touch on the guitar and is an incredibly thoughtful player, and his music is intensely hard, but you would never guess that when you hear him play it because it's just so effortless. And that was a gig that I spent a solid week, 2 weeks at least, just learning some of that music and just listening to Marcus Gilmore just destroy it. And it all sounds so effortless, and you're like, that's not so bad. It's cool. Like I can understand how this goes. Mm-hmm. And then you start playing it with them, and you're like, I don't know this. No, I thought I knew this. And like he's like, oh, cool. No, we'll just do it a little bit slower. It's like, don't worry about it. We'll do it a little bit slower. And like before you know it, like I'm just pushing through it, and it's like I just crapped all over that. And the majority of listeners probably don't notice that. Like they probably appreciate the new energy or whatever, but
right. But what just came out of you isn't what you had been listening to and studying.
Exactly, and you can see like with Marcus with Gilad, it's like I'm not going to show up and play like Marcus. Like that, talk about a very like unique sound on the drums and just gorgeous like musical moments that happen. But they've also played all of their music together for years and years. So,
right.
But yeah, that, and then, I'm, like I said, the other thing that helps is that it's not all new to me. Mm-hmm. I listen to a lot of different music, so I'm as likely to be at home listening to, like, just recently I started going back and listening to things that I used to listen to in high school. Mm-hmm. This is a nice little circle here. Yeah. Like making a playlist for her that was like Paul Simon and Aretha Franklin and, James Taylor and all this stuff that I used to listen to. And it's like, I know these songs inside and out. Mm-hmm. And then it's, going back and listening to all different kinds of stuff. Brazilian music. Singers just playing some straight ahead stuff. Listening to some Basie and some Thad Jones and some Mel Lewis and listening to, Fie de Kilimanjaro, Miles, and then listening to, some like Knee Body and some really technical twisting in and out, some Mahavishnu.
Right. So whatever gets thrown at you, you can have some reference that you've at least listened to.
Yeah.
As part of your library that you can say it's kind of like this or it's kind of that groove or that.
Yeah, exactly. It's and not to ever put anybody in like little boxes. It's certainly, I'm not trying to do that to any of those people I just mentioned. It's just like I have it helps if you have a reference point when you hear them. If it's not foreign to you in every way,
right,
you're like, oh, I can see like that is an influence or that is an influence, and I can hear that like the drummers that he always chooses have some certain things in common, or the way he arranges his music has a lot of things in common with so and so, or just with himself. Over like you can see how people put things together. Yeah. So some of it is like, I also like to read about how other people digest music and like get some different viewpoints on it. So the idea of like I'm just gonna dive in and just start like hit play and just start making notes on a chart is what I used to do, and that does not make any sense to me anymore. Now I need to like play like the whole album, because sometimes you start on a tune that's like the easiest or the hardest, and you're going to start judging the whole rest of the album based on one song,
right,
or whatever material they send you, right? So I've started to realize like, oh no, I want to get like the vibe. What is going on here? What are they thinking? Where is the music going?
Right. Is just focusing on one song could put you in the wrong headspace for the overall concept of like that night of music.
Yeah, you could like, put on this thing that's like the randomly like out tune, or the like more groovy, like almost overly energetic tune, and then you listen to everything else and it's like, oh, that's a very different vibe all of a sudden.
Right.
Or you have an idea of someone's playing from one of their albums and they have like 8 albums out, so I'm more and more I'm starting to get into like the bigger picture again.
Yeah.
Like,
so it sounds like a fair amount of practice and shedding, to be sure, but as much, if not more, just sort of study. And
I spend a lot more time digesting the music listening than I do sitting at the drums.
Yeah.
I also don't have much time to sit at the drums anymore.
Right.
So I end up sitting at the drums during lessons, during rehearsals, during gigs, and hopefully in the new year when I have so many things I want to practice and I don't always have time to like actually work on, or I have things I want to work on, but working on it one day, and it's almost like, what's the point?
Right.
Like, because there's more advanced concepts. So right. I feel like I get a lot more understanding of people's music, listening to it and checking out the ins and outs and where is it going and what is it doing. And then I'll sit here and like play along to it if there's some weird twists and turns in the music where it's like,
just get something under your hands.
What is that thing? Yeah, like some of the new Rosenboom music, like he sends me MIDI tracks of like messed up things. And it's just like, I just need to repeat like from 146 to 230 again, because that section is up. And it repeats twice and then it moves on. And then you like get the section down and then you're like, oh, now I need to work on the transition. Damn it.
Right.
And yeah, so there are things that I need to go to the drum set, but I feel like more of it is ears.
Yeah.
More ears. Less hands.
Yeah, there you go. More ears, less hands.
Yeah. Yes.
Sage advice from Dan Schnelle.
Nice.
Dan, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah,
and continued success in 2016 with Josh and all the other dozens of projects that you're in on, and with your lovely family.
Thank you, sir, and to see you.
Thank you.
Happy travels there.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Yes,
that's more important.
Yes, please.
Happy's important too, but yeah.
Thanks so much.
Atlanta, here you go.
Atlanta.
Hey.
Man, looking forward to food.
Ha!
There you have it, Dan Schnelle. If you're anywhere around Southern California, I highly recommend you find out where Dan is playing and go see him. Whether he's playing something original or more avant-garde or more straight ahead and swinging, he just has amazing facility and vocabulary around the kit and a really sophisticated ear. And again, it's because he has put in the time and is continuing to do so. I also recommend you get hip to Josh Nelson, whose piano playing and compositions rank high on the list of my favorites. You can check him out at joshnelsonmusic.com. You can also find some recordings with Dan there on Josh's website. Thanks as always for listening. Please leave us a rating or a review on iTunes if you feel so inclined. That's very helpful to us. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.